It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Bertie Frankel. We're here in your beautiful home in Kfar Saba in Israel. And Bertie, I've known you a few years already, but your story is incredible, how you were saved.
Hi.
If you could tell us a little bit about your family and being born in Krakow and who your parents were.
Yes, we had acquired a nice family life in Poland. I was born in Krakow in 1937, December, and for a year and a half things were going very well and we were all very happy. And then in September of 1939, Adolf Hitler led the German army into Poland. My father, he felt that this was not going to work out, that we couldn't get on with the Germans, and he said we must run away. Krakow was not all that far from the German border, and we didn't have all that much time, but my father went to my mother and he said, pack, get ready, make one suitcase, and in an hour we're going. They didn't have phones like we have today, so people were running between houses and we were trying to get relatives to come and friends to come, and of course not everyone could be contacted. It was a huge mess. But a few people came and joined my father, who had meanwhile gone down to the bus depot and bribed a bus driver with 2 rolls of material, which he had as samples from his business. The bus driver came to the house and we went down with our one suitcase. My mother said it was awful because how can you pack a lifetime's possessions in 1 hour and start to run? They brought a little food. We were kosher, of course, observant, and my father put into the suitcase a large talit and large tefillin, because in those days in Poland there were no small tefillin. The rest of the room was taken up by clothes. I took my teddy bear and that's it. We ran into the bus and we drove away towards, my father said the Germans are coming from the west, so we must run towards the east, away from the Germans, into Russia. And we ran. The first day went smoothly enough, but gradually we felt the traffic building up as more and more people ran away with cars, trucks. The road became difficult, huge traffic jams, people were shouting, pushing, what a mess. I was a little too young to remember any of this, but I was told after the war by my parents about 1,000 times how we ran away, because it was the greatest experience that they had ever had in their lives, this running away from the Germans. When we reached safety eventually in far-off New Zealand, there was no television, there was very little radio, there was a war raging with Japan, and what was there to do but sit in the kitchen and talk about running away from Poland. So I heard the story about 1,000 times, and then when we started to bring relatives in who had been saved, I heard it again and again and again. Anyway, we ran off, and after a day or two we were attacked by the German Air Force. I'll never understand why. We were not a strategic target, but the planes came, dive bombers, Stuka. They dived and made a terrible noise and dropped bombs, and the houses that were near us when we were attacked fell down and people were killed. This happened for 2 or 3 days. My father just couldn't understand why the Germans were wasting fuel, aeroplanes, risking pilots to shoot up a few refugees. It wasn't just us, it was the whole street full of refugees marching. Anyway, on the 3rd or the 4th day, the car broke down, the bus broke down, or the driver broke it down, and my father went off and he found a peasant with a horse and cart who was willing to haul us. And so there we were, myself, my mother, my father, sitting on a horse and cart with our suitcase, and one or two other relatives and some friends, and whoever else was able to get on, got on, and this poor horse was pulling us all to the east. This couldn't last long, and it didn't, but eventually we reached Kovno. Now Kovno was under the Russian influence, and a lot of the Jews made their first base there. It had a large Jewish community. Now, on the way to Kovno, we were passed by a huge convoy of Russian soldiers and tanks and trucks and everything. It was a huge convoy. It took hours to pass, and also we saw aeroplanes coming from the east towards the west, Russian planes with Russian markings. They did us no harm, except told us to get off the road. We had no idea what was going on. We didn't know this was part of the Ribbentrop agreement with Germany, that Hitler had signed an agreement of not peace, but non-violence between Russia and Germany. He wanted quiet on the Russian border while he dealt with the rest of the countries in the Western European area. Actually, these Russians saved our lives. They went into Poland and divided Poland between Russia and Germany, which meant that between the oncoming German army and ourselves was the Russian army, which were now staking out their place in half of Poland. We didn't know this, but we were quite safe now from the Germans for a while. Now, we all know that this didn't last for long. It only lasted for 3 or 4 months, and then Germany went into Russia and attacked. But by then, we had gone. Anyway, we came to Kovno, and lots of Jews all rushing around, all of them speaking mainly Yiddish, you know, was geht, was ist, was it down, blah, gossip everywhere. My father said he doesn't know what's going on, but he thinks that there's a deal that if we got visas from the Dutch embassy, from the Dutch consulate, we would then have to go to the Japanese consul, who was willing to give visas to Jews to transit Japan on their way to Curacao. At the moment, it was the only thing that the Jewish people could grasp. This was their way out of Europe. This was their way to safety from the Germans. But when you come to think of it, where on earth is Curacao when you are sitting in just south of Russia? And how are you going to get there? There were no aeroplanes in those days. Shipping was practically non-existent. And then you had to get to Japan, and the Japanese graciously, well, they didn't, but one man, Consul Sugihara, graciously said, I will write the visas. So my father went to the consulate of the Netherlands, like everyone else, had to wait a while, then he got in and he sat with the consul. He had a very difficult name. It started with Z.
Zwartendijk.
Yeah, it's written down.
Zwartendijk.
The consul said, my father said, I need 5 visas for my wife, my son, my brother, my sister, and for my wife's brother. Consul said, look, there were no machines in those days, everything was handwritten. The consul said, I can't write 5 visas, my hand is hurting me. So my father said, all right, you write one, and I'll write the others if you give me a pen. Now, in those days, pens were scarce. There were no biros. There were only very expensive fountain pens. So he did, and my father wrote most of our own visas. There's an old joke about writing your own ticket. Well, that's what he did. He wrote our own visas. It was only later that the Dutch, I spoke with a Dutch lady, an investigator of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, and she said later he had himself made a rubber stamp, and what your father had to write by hand was just stamped, but nobody thought of that for the first few months. So with this visa, my father went to the Japanese embassy, consulate in Kaunas, and it was like a rugby game. Hundreds of thousands of Jews all around the place. He couldn't get within a few meters of the gate even, so he walked around dejectedly around the house, down the block, down the side street, and he saw a back gate. And he said, well, if I go in, what can they do? Maximum, they can throw me out, you see. So he went in the back gate and he saw a lady, a Chinese lady, an elderly lady, obviously a housekeeper, come out from a door and throw a bowl of water into the garden. So he followed her in and he found himself in the kitchen. She immediately came to attention and bowed and hissed. My father didn't know what to do, but he did the same. He hoped he didn't offend her. He thought it was good morning, hello. Anyway, she pointed to the steps going up, and he went up, and he found himself in the corridor of Sugihara's home and office.
Could this have been a Japanese lady? Was it a Japanese lady or a Chinese?
Japanese.
It was a Japanese lady.
Yeah, Japanese, Japan. I said China.
No, Chinese lady.
Oh, sorry.
No, a Japanese lady.
He didn't know what to do now, but this was solved for him by the sound of running water from a toilet. A door opened and out came a man in black suit, white pinstripes, doing up his buttons. Buttons. In those days there were no zips, remember? And the chappie looked at him, astonished. He said, well, in German, what are you doing in my house? And my father said, obviously this must be the consul. And he says, sir, I have come to ask you for visas for my wife and children. This was the moment my father said, obviously thought he would say to him, get out. But no, Sugihara wanted to help. So he said to him, please come into my office. And so my father was in Sugihara's office and he said, how many visas do you need, and give me the names. So again, and Sugihara was writing. Again, there were no typewriters, no machines, no computers. Sugihara wrote the visas, gave them to my father and wished him well. My father went out with 5 visas in his pocket. He didn't wait. He broke the law by getting into the house without permission. He didn't play fair with all the other people outside, but he was playing for his life, and he had nothing to lose. And so he had the visas. Now, with the visas was a small problem that, fine, but we need a ship. How are we going to get there? The joint from New York was helping us, was sending us money and to the other refugees, and we were able to keep body and soul together, and the Japanese kept renewing our visa, which was for 2 months. I have them here.
So, Bertie, can I just ask, you have a picture of you in Vilna, this was in Vilna in 1939, a picture of you in Vilna?
Yes, yes.
Did you go from Kovno? Did you go from Kovno to Vilna?
Yeah, we were in Vilna as well. They're close to each other.
I just want to take a picture of if you could lift up the picture.
Huh?
So this is a beautiful picture of you and how old were you at this time when you were in Vilna? In 1939?
Yes.
How old were you?
Sorry, Les?
How old were you?
I was, in those days, I was about 2.5. I was already remembering. Anyway, we had the visa.
We're going to just take, if you can just show these pictures. Okay, these are wonderful, wonderful pictures. These are all pictures taken in Vilna.
Yeah.
So this is in November 1939 in Vilna. And then here you have a wonderful picture of okay, and you have here Bertie, Perla, Wilk, Henke, Berchik.
Sorry?
Here you have a picture of yourself.
Oh yeah, the names of the people. My uncles, my aunt, my father, my mother. Because, you know, I made this album for the future generations. Mm-hmm. Not everybody ever met some of them, so at least they'll know who
and
they
here's
are.
a picture of you and your dear mother, Perla.
My mother, my father's brother, my mother's brother.
And here's another picture of you in Vilna in
There's
1939.
a picture of the Japanese consulate. Now here if you look, you'll see this has nothing to do with our escape, but subsequently I was invited to Japan and we went to the school, Yautsu town, where Sugihara was born, and the school is in Israel. Now here written on the wall of the school is the reason why he did the visas.
So we're just going to read it, Bertie. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. To tell the truth, I thought about it all night. After struggling and agonizing, I concluded that humanity is paramount. Then, fearing nothing, I decided to issue those visas.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. And
he, of course...
Here's the visa. This is a copy of the visa.
Well, that's the visa. The first was the one for Holland, and then the one for Japan.
And you still have these visas?
Sorry?
What happened to the original visas?
We had two visas, yeah.
And what happened to the original? What happened to the visas? What happened to the visas?
I don't know this, but my father and mother had all these documents. My father passed away, my mother took care of them. I remember she said Mrs. Sugihara visited Israel many years ago, and she took the visa with her to show Mrs. Sugihara. Since then, I believe it's got lost.
What a
because
pity.
it wasn't there, but a photocopy was there. And this is the Sugihara list with members of our...
And here you are on the list. This is
we're
your...
on the list.
And this is the Sugihara list.
That's also available on Google.
And you are 275, 76, and 282.
Yeah.
And before that is your aunt, your father, your uncle, your mother. This is amazing.
Yeah. There's more lists. And that's the Japanese people made a file about us. So anyway, should I carry on?
Please.
We notified, at this stage, we had no passports. My parents never had passports. They didn't go anywhere. They ran away, and we were referred by the Japanese people to go to Tokyo. We hadn't come to Japan yet, have we? We got more money from the joint, and we bought tickets on the train to Moscow. In Moscow we stayed in a hotel for 2 or 3 days. Then we went to the railway station and got onto the express which went around Lake Baikal to Vladivostok. It took 14 days.
That's a Trans-Siberian.
Yeah, Siberia, Trans-Siberian Express. It took 14 days. We stayed on the train all the time. Food we didn't have much, but here and there people got on and sold apples and sold bread. My father tried to keep kosher as long as he could, and he said we can do without meat, but you know, cheese, apples, oranges, and a lot of the people were Jewish, the peddlers, and they refused to take money. And my father was very grateful because we didn't have much money. And so we came to Vladivostok, which was way on the other side of Russia, facing the Sea of Japan, facing Japan. And there we went to the docks, and there was a large ship full of flags and bunting, and I pulled my mother's hand. I was about 2.5, 2 3/4.
Bertie, have you got any memories?
Yeah, I'm remembering this. And I pulled her towards, she said, no, no, that's not our ship. And we went to a small, ugly-looking thing. It was called the Amakusa Maru. Practically all the refugees used the same ship, Amakusa Maru. She made several crossings. This was a ship which was really a freighter. It was used mainly for hauling animals, cattle around the coast, cattle for meat, for milk. It was filthy, it was dirty, it was not a passenger ship. They had put mats down on the floor for us to sit on, to sleep on. The food was not much. It was mainly green apples and dry bread and the crusts. And I used to gnaw on these crusts. Now this not a bit. To this day, I save the crusts from the bread we eat. I toast them. And now and again I put cheese on it and nibble away at the crust, and I with a cup of coffee for breakfast to enjoy them. Now we survived, and we didn't care. We didn't give a hoot, because it was a ship which was taking us away from the continent of Europe, away from the Germans, away from the Russians, to probably, hopefully, a new life.
Bertie, can I ask you, what is your first recollections?
When what?
What is your very first recollections? What do you remember going...
well, on the ship.
But before the ship, do you remember anything about...
And in Vilna.
Do you remember a bit about Kovna or Vilna?
Sorry?
Do you remember anything about Kovna or Vilna?
Yes, I remember going to a synagogue there for my uncle's birthday. He had a plate of cholent in a sledge she was pulling, and the baker had taken it in to keep it warm. A gun, but I remember it, and then I remember the bombing by the German aircraft. I don't remember, but I think as a result, my mother said we were blown all over the place by the blasts. I can't stand noise today. I hear a boom, I hate it. And I think it's a direct result, but I mean, it doesn't bother me, so why worry about it? And when we were on the ship, the Amakusa Maru, it weighed all of 7,000 tons. A gust of wind made it. The water, the sea was rough. My mother, of course, was the worst sailor in the world. She was sick the whole time. I was all right. My dad was all right. And we reached at a port called Tsuruga. Tsuruga is the port for the city of Kobe. Now at Tsuruga port, which calls itself today the port of safety, the port of they know they saved a lot of Jews. They were very nice people, the Japanese people in Tsuruga. We were on the land, and I remember it had been raining because the ground was wet, the concrete was wet, and we were taken off the ship, and a boy was walking around with a basket of apples. He gave me one. It was a red apple, whereas on the ship we had been given green apples. This was a sweet red apple. On the ship they were not sweet, they were half sour. And I saw the men were wiping them on their shirts like we later used to wipe cricket balls. And so I wiped it and I took a huge bite out of it. In those days I had good teeth and I could eat it. It was the best apple that I ever ate. And I remember it to this day. It was delicious. I looked around for the boy to ask for another one, but by then he had gone. The place was very tidy, very clean. The Japanese people wouldn't speak to you without half bowing and saying hello. Very polite people. We really were impressed by this for the whole of the 6 months, and very clean. My mother said you could put your food on the floor and eat it from the floor because the floor was very, very clean. Every time they walked on it, they wiped it. So we were in Suruga, but we couldn't stay. We're not Japanese people. We were put into apartments in the city of Kobe. We couldn't work. My father was willing to work, but they said, no, you're refugees, you can't work. But you have to put your papers in order. You can't run around without a passport. So the Japanese allowed my father and mother they had to take me, they couldn't leave me by myself, to Tokyo. It was a whole day's journey to the Polish embassy in Tokyo to get a passport. And the ambassador there, and Mr. Roma, was my mother said, a very sympathetic man. He was kindly disposed towards the refugees. Oh, it's the wrong way. And he gave us a passport, which I have here. A Polish passport.
Oh, and this is the original passport?
Issued by the by the Polish embassy in Tokyo, in Japan. It's not printed, it's pressed, you see.
This is a picture of your parents. And it gives the date of your birth, 1937.
It has the date, it has everything.
Beryl, yeah. And your parents managed to get this passport in Tokyo?
Yes, in Poland, in Japan, from the Polish embassy. Now,
and it's got the date, issued in 1942.
Yes, 42. Sorry.
Tokyo, 1941.
Sure.
Oh, and I think it expires in 1942. Tokyo, 1941. And I think the expiry is in 42. This is
There's
incredible.
a picture of my father and mother inside, in the middle, I think.
You have. And a lot of this is handwritten, or...
Sorry?
Bertie, this is so valuable, this is so precious.
Pardon?
This is so precious. Wow. And here's the picture of your parents.
Yes, that's my parents.
And it says Tokyo. Yeah, it was issued in Tokyo in 1941. Incredible, Bertie. And then
now into this passport is inside it, if you keep going, is the British visa.
There's the British visa
for Australia and New Zealand.
And this was issued in Kobe.
Issued in Tokyo.
Okay, British Consulate General. think it says Kobe, but wow, that's and you got this after when you received you first had to receive the passport in order to get the British.
Yes, you see, the Polish ambassador was negotiating with the British ambassador to get visas into the British Empire countries for what he called his clients, and the British eventually issued 50 visas. Issued 500 visas, 450 for Australia and 50 for New Zealand. We were among the ones for New Zealand.
And here you have also from the Consul General of the Netherlands. Also from the Consul General of the Netherlands.
Here from the Netherlands,
which was issued in Kobe.
I don't really know why they put that in there, but now nobody went to Curacao. Nobody. Anyway, with this passport, the British put their visa into it, and a ship was finally found. It was called the we left in July of 1941. Here's a Japanese exit visa.
I'm just going to 1 minute. Bertie, 1 minute. This is your Japanese exit visa. But Bertie, can I ask you, what is your memories of Japan, of Kobe? What do you, for those 6 months that you were...
Unfortunately, where we were, we lived for 6 months in an apartment organized by the Japanese, and we were financed by the Joint. To this day, I'm very grateful to the Joint. Incidentally, in New Zealand, as soon as my father established himself and had some capital, he calculated how much they had given him and he sent them a check. Now this caused chaos because his cousin was working at the Joint. He said, "We have no procedure for receiving money. We didn't know what to do with it." But he's like that. He likes to pay back. He doesn't like to own. I've inherited the same. I hate owing anything. I like to pay things off. Anyway, my impressions of Japan. Unfortunately, where we were in Tokyo no longer exists. It was, the apartments were destroyed.
In Kobe?
In Kobe. The apartments were destroyed by the American Air Force during World War II. I don't blame the American Air Force whatever, because by then I was on their side, fighting the Allied cause against the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Anyway, the American Air Force destroyed the buildings we were in. 1 or 2 were left, but they were wiped out a few years ago by a large earthquake that occurred. So where we were no longer exists, but I remember it. We had no bathroom in our apartment. If we needed a bath, we used to go to the local bathhouse at the end of the street. To them it's quite normal. Women to the right, men to the left, and you all get into the same hot tub and come out hot and warm and clean. The cleaning of the place was spotless. Everything was clean. The Japanese were extremely polite. They couldn't do enough to help. Really nice hosts. They wanted to get rid of us because they wanted to go to war. We could see the preparations. They were taking down the metal lampposts and replacing them with wooden ones. They wanted the metal probably to make guns and tanks with. In the end, we found a ship. It was also called the Kamakura Maru. I have a photo, Kamakura Maru.
But Bertie, I just want to ask you, do you remember going to the synagogue in Kobe?
See?
Do you remember going to the synagogue? They had a synagogue in Kobe?
No. I either wasn't taken or there wasn't one. But I didn't go.
Did you go to school?
Sorry?
Did you go to a kindergarten or a school?
In Tokyo, in Japan? No, no. We were out of everything. They didn't want to include us in anything.
So what did you do during the day?
I was with my parents. My parents didn't do much all day either. We were not allowed to work. They said you can stay here. You can't join our society and work. We don't want you to work. We want you to go. As soon as we find a ship, we'll put you on it.
How did you have money for food? How did your parents?
The joint. We owed the joint a lot of money. They sent money, the joint.
And you remember the food that you ate there?
Yes, not much meat at all. I don't think we ate meat, but lots of rice, lots of apples. They're not very big on bread. They don't eat all that much bread, the Japanese people, but there was bread. The food was all right, lots of vegetables and soups, and I remember they also eat soup for breakfast, especially the older people. Later, when we visited Japan a few years ago, my wife and I was amazed, soup for breakfast, and who eats it? A lot of the elderly people. I didn't have the soup, I had other things. They have a Western breakfast as well. You can either choose a Japanese breakfast or Western breakfast. Japanese food, if it's prepared well, it's beyond our understanding. We have to be trained and we have to learn. For example, when I visited here with the mayor of Yaotsu, invited us for lunch on the first day, and you are served lots of little dishes with lots of juices, and I'm looking at this, and he says to me, through my translator, I had a translator attached, look at me all the time, eat what I eat, because if you eat it in the right order, it's delicious. And if you don't, then it's not good. And it was delicious. I don't really know what it was, a lot of it, but it was delicious. You have to know Japanese food, you have to learn it.
Bertie, did you learn any Japanese?
No. I was too young, and when I revisited it, I was already too old to learn a language. Although, I must say, it's a very difficult country to visit because of the language. They don't bother learning English for the sake of learning English. They learn English if they need it. And then they learn it like an Englishman. They know every word, every vowel, every sound. I met in Jerusalem a Japanese chappie, and I was speaking to him in English. And suddenly in Hebrew he orders a drink and asks me if I want one too. He was a salesman for Japanese watches. And I said, how come you know Hebrew? He said, well, I can't come to Israel and sell watches speaking Japanese. So you see, he had to learn. They are very intelligent people. But I asked a hotel manager where we were in one of the towns that Sugihara had visited, why don't all of you speak English? He said, because we don't need to. Not many tourists come here. Not many business people come here. When you get to Tokyo, you'll see everyone speaks English. We only learn it if we need it. Fine, that's all right with me. They are a very intelligent and industrious people, efficient. They don't waste time learning what they don't need to learn.
Bertie, can I ask, do you remember any recollections of the yeshiva boys, the yeshiva bochrim from the Mir? Or
No.
You were too young.
I didn't go to any yeshiva.
No, but you remember when you were in Saruga, or when you were in Kobe, any yeshiva boys?
No, there might have been, but I didn't go. My father didn't go.
And on the ship, what do you remember on the ship when you went?
Which ship? On the ship
to Saruga?
To Japan.
Yeah, to Japan.
Sitting on the mats, talking to people, walking around, going on deck. Didn't stay long because of the weather. There was nowhere to sit or to lie except to sit on the mats, and then they would serve the meal, which was mainly, like I mentioned, apples and quite a few, as much as you wanted, apples and dry bread. The ship was most uncomfortable, and you know, today, Nira and I, my wife Nira, she's watching television. We've done 2 cruises with the Royal Caribbean on reasonably small ships that weighed 70,000 tons. Mind you, it's enough less, 70,000 tons. It took me a whole day to stop getting lost until one of the sailors took me by the arm and said, look, you always make sure, go outside to see which way we're going. Then you'll know the front from the back. Then you know left from right, and if you look near the lifts, you see the number of the deck. So that's the way you navigate your way around the ship, 70,000 tons. Quite a small one, because today they go up to 200,000 tons. And here we were in a rough storm on this Japanese ship, Amakusa Maru, 7,000 tons. Every wave we went up, every trough we went down. But we didn't care, we wanted to get away from Europe.
So who was on the ship? Who came to Japan with you in your family?
Oh yes.
It was your parents?
My family, it was my parents, my father's brother, and my mother's brother. Later we were able to manage to bring a few more relatives who had survived, but we had a lot of fellow refugees.
Here you have.
That's the ship leaving Japan.
Okay, but in this picture, did they not come with?
Yeah, this is my father smoking. That's me. That's my mother. That's my aunt, my father's sister. She was with us here, but she stayed because she had her boyfriend or something. There were.
And that is her son?
Sorry, it's written. Vilna, in Vilna, November of 1939.
Bertie, if you could hold. And what happened with her?
She got stuck in Japan, and we were able to bring her to New Zealand after the war.
But she also came to Japan?
Yes, but after we had gone. You see, you couldn't really control your destiny. Things were happening, and...
This is the... I mean, you have all these papers, the Jewish community in Kobe.
Yeah, the Jewish community. There was a Jewish community.
Show this, because this is amazing. The Jewish community of Kobe, Ashkenazim, Committee for the Assistance to Refugees. And this is dated June the 10th, 1941. Dear sir, we have handled your permit of stay in the country to the police authorities for extension, and we hope to have the same returned on June the 17th. You are therefore requested to call on us on that day and afterwards. This letter will not be regarded as valid. This is from the Jewish community of Kobe, with the president. So they really went out of their way to help. The community were very helpful.
Yes, yes. Well, more certificates.
This is a permit to stay in Japan. And it's number 1897, and it's got your name, and it's Beryl. And it's got here a vaccination. To whom it may concern, this is to verify that Mr., Mrs. and Miss Frankel have been vaccinated against typhoid fever and dysentery. This is from the physician. And here you have a picture near your apartment with you and your mother.
Yeah.
In Kobe in 1941. That is so special.
Yes, you see, that's a visa.
That was the British This is a copy, but we saw the original from the British. This is, and then this is a cable sent to by David Frankel.
That's my father's older brother. He sent us a cable to say he was trying to come.
The 13th of the 4th, 41, Benjamin Wolf Frankel. And did he manage to come?
Yes, he came. In the end he came. The dollars he sent through the bank never arrived. Somebody stole them. But my father said, you don't need money. The main thing is you're here and, you know, we'll all look after each other.
Can I show these letters, Bertie? Can I show these letters?
Yes.
Do you mind if I show these? This is so precious.
Yes, these are letters. Which ones are these from my mother's parents?
These are letters sent to us in Kobe by Miller and Meyer Shore from Krakow.
They stayed in Poland, my mother's parents.
And what happened?
They died. They were killed by the Germans.
This is in 1941.
They had Turkish passports, and then the Turkish passports expired, and the Turkish embassy, who were in cahoots with the Germans, refused to renew them and told the Germans they are no longer Turks, you can have them. And the Germans went and killed them, shot them. On the day they went into the concentration camp, they were shot. There were witnesses who later told my mother.
And these are the original letters from your family in Krakow?
Sorry?
These are the original letters?
Yes. While we were in Japan, they wrote letters. They are all in Polish or German, of course.
The Jewish community
mainly Polish.
Bertie, this is so valuable. This is so precious.
Sorry?
It's very precious.
It's yes, very precious. It's originals.
And here you have. This is from Krakow. From 1938. You have even.
Yeah.
They sent. You get documents from. It's amazing. This is so special. And you also have letters sent to you from Brenda, from Krakow.
Yeah. Now Brenda is my mother's sister. She had remained behind, and they spent the war in Hungary. They somehow got to Hungary, and leave it, I'll put it together later, Les.
And did they survive?
Sorry?
Okay, I'll put it. Did they survive?
They stayed in Hungary, but she had written a couple of letters to us.
And this is from Brenda, in 1941, also from Krakow. And here she even did a drawing. She even...
Yeah. Pictures and written.
And they managed to get to Hungary.
Yes, they survived the war in Hungary. Their daughters were given to a church to be looked after, but they had no problem getting them back after the war. They were lucky in that way.
And have you kept in touch? You kept in touch?
My father and mother brought them to New Zealand after the war.
That's amazing.
Yeah, now you see what happened was, after the war, Les, nobody knew where anybody was. Everybody was looking for everybody. Fortunately, my father had a cousin, Shopser, who had left Poland earlier, and he was in New York, and he was a volunteer with the Joint, and he was able to get a lot of information, and a telegram arrives from him, found Brenda, sent her $200. This is the address, This is the telephone number. So my parents rang her up. A telephone in those days was very scarce. What's it that you found?
No, you can continue. I'm just. This is amazing, Bertie. So they did the telephone.
And so they spoke for 3 minutes. It cost an arm and a leg. And the operator, in those days, the operator would come on and said, "Call is going to end in 10 seconds." And my father shouted at her, "Can you give us another 3 minutes?" And she said, "Another 3 minutes." You know, it was very emotional. Nobody said anything normal. It was all emotional nonsense. Later, on subsequent calls, they were able to speak, and my father went to the New Zealand government. That's another story. With the help of an influential member of the community, and they had to go all the way up to the Minister of Internal Affairs. The minister said, "Why the heck do we want these people here? We just voted at the United Nations to start the state of Israel. We were the second country after America. We said, yes, we agree. And so why do you want to bring them here?" My father said, "Because we are here. We want to unify the family. We are already New Zealanders. We want to..." So the minister said, "Yes, there's a lot of sense in what you're saying. And, all right, I'll allow it." And so he sent word down and they got visas and they came.
So Bertie, this is an original Japanese exit visa, July.
Show me what it is. Yes, that's...
It's the original Japanese exit visa, July 1941.
Yeah.
And it says in English, Frankel Benjamin, 33, wife Perla, 24, and then his son Beryl, 3. And then it's got also Shore, 13, and it's 16730. And this is the original Japanese.
Yeah, let me see. Frankel Benjamin, yeah, it's... this is an exit visa, right?
Yeah, the exit visa.
Yeah, from Japan. For my father, they didn't usually write anything in English. It was mainly Japanese. These are certificates from Japan, China, because from Japan we got the ship to China.
Oh, you first had to go to Shanghai?
Shanghai. Now, Shanghai...
I'm going to just take this out. This is... And you remember going to Shanghai?
I remember, yeah.
This is the Public Health Department of Shanghai, Municipal Council.
And there are photos at the back.
This is your Perla, and it's got your name, Beryl. Sure, it's amazing, and it's 25th of July 1941, and you've been vaccinated for smallpox.
Sorry?
This is a vaccination for smallpox.
Yes, for small. They were mad about health.
And this is the pictures.
I'm the two young fellows. I'm the youngest one. The older one is my mother's brother.
And what was his name?
He came with us to New Zealand.
What was his name?
They saved him. Otherwise he would have stayed in Poland. So my mother's parents said, "Take him. At least we have to stay. We're safe with Turkish passports, but take him." And he came. He came.
And his name is Beryl Shaw.
Beryl Shaw, yeah. You might know him. He wanders around all these events with Sugihara as well. He's 95 today.
That's your cousin, Beryl Shaw.
It's my uncle.
Your uncle?
Yeah. He's still around. Now, you see, but that's how he was then, you see.
So this is the... Oh, and he came with your parents and with you. It was the four of you.
Yeah, came to New Zealand. Not specifically to New Zealand, it's just where we ended up by great...
And what was the age difference between
10 years. He's now 95 and I'm 85.
Because here in the exit visa, We also have, this is for
He's on that as well, I think.
Beryl Shaw. He was 13.
Yeah.
You were 3 and he was 13 at the time.
He was with us.
And your parents?
They passed away by
I know,
now.
but were you close with Beryl?
Sorry?
Were you very close with Beryl?
He was, well, yes, he was treated like a son.
Your parents treated him like a son.
Yeah.
And this is the boat that you took, the Kamakura Maru. This was the boat to from Japan to Shanghai.
Yeah. Now we used that ship to get to Shanghai.
And how was that ship? Was it?
It was a bit bigger than the first one. I don't have many details on it, but Shanghai was the exact opposite of Japan. Shanghai, whereas Japan was clean and tidy and the people were polite, Shanghai was one big mess, noisy, dirty, unkept, people screaming and shouting. Fortunately, we only stayed two weeks, and the joint then put us on a ship bound for Indonesia, for Java and Indonesia. It was called the Dutch East Indies in those days. And we got to the Dutch East Indies, and there were a lot of Jews came to meet the ship to see if the Jews were going to come off. And they tried to persuade my father. They said, look, business is very good here. We're doing very well. You'll do well here. But my father said, no, the Japanese will come. They're at war already. They're going to start a war. They'll come here. It's not good. My advice to you is to get away. Whether they listened to him or not, I don't know. But we left on the ship towards, it was the Rice. You'll see a photo there of the ship called Rice, to Australia.
So this is from Shanghai, China to Sydney, Australia. And this ship looks a bigger ship. It looks, the Rice, yeah.
The Rice. The Rice was a large Dutch liner for those days. It was already a proper ship with a cabin and with lounges. It's nothing like we have today, but it was still okay. This is a cabin list of the people. A lot of the names are friends of ours who remained friends in New Zealand until they all died.
Cabin list, Rice,
they all came together. In fact, I have an old friend myself who we met on the ship, Peter Baruch. Eventually I left New Zealand and went to England and then to Israel. He left New Zealand and went to Australia, but we stayed in touch and we've been friends. We met on the ship, on the Rangatira, from Sydney to New Zealand. He was the first friend I ever had, and the same vice versa. We remained friends.
So this is your arrival in Brisbane. You first arrived in Brisbane.
Huh?
You arrived in Brisbane, in Australia.
We arrived in Brisbane. Here is the passport office, Brisbane.
Here's the original.
September 1941. Already war. The British was already at war. That's Brisbane. Now, my father, who was on deck when we came to Brisbane, said this is a very good country. Why? He said, there's a worker on the wharf with a trolley, standing idle, leaning on his trolley, smoking a cigarette, watching us berthing, and nobody is shouting at him to get on with his work. A good country. He was right, Australia. Now, we got off in Australia, and already the Jewish community were there to help us, to look after us. And my father said, look, they wanted him to stay. And he said, okay, we'll stay. But the authorities would not agree to take us off the quota for New Zealand. They said, look, there's a war on. You don't want to make trouble, do you? And so my father said, okay, we had to go to New Zealand, and we went. A New Zealand ship called the Rangatira, there's a photo, that's her here.
You arrived in Sydney a few weeks later.
Sorry?
Your arrival in Sydney was on the 26th of September.
What?
You arrived in Sydney
We left Brisbane and arrived in Sydney.
Yeah.
The next page you'll see Sydney.
This is amazing. This is your arrival in Sydney on the 26th. This is... Wow. So we have over here, this is on September, 26th. And this is in October, so you have here... Arrival in Sydney. It's amazing that you... And then on the 2nd of October, you arrived in Wellington. And
Yes.
this is the ship, the Ranger...
On the Rangatira. In Wellington we arrived on the 2nd of October 1941. Now look what a great good fortune that was. October 1941, November, December 7th, Pearl Harbor. And the world exploded in the Pacific. The Japanese attacked everything American and the Americans fought back. We in New Zealand were threatened by them. They were coming for New Zealand and Australia to get the food. New Zealand wanted to bring back its soldiers from the Middle East. Roosevelt said, no, I'm sending MacArthur to take care of you. And MacArthur was sent secretly at night by 2 PT boats. He was taken off from where they were, and they were up to their necks fighting the Japs, but the president took him away, brought him to Melbourne and said, organise the fight back against Japan from Melbourne, take care of Australia and New Zealand. And MacArthur did. And in my generation at those days, we were very pro-American because Britain was finished. It couldn't look after us. It was, the guns in Singapore were built to fire. I've seen these guns, to see huge guns, 16-inch guns. No Japanese ship will come, will be blown out of the water. The Japanese weren't even there. The Japanese landed in Malaya behind the guns. They came down the peninsula on bicycles. They put their heavy things on bicycles. The guns couldn't be turned around. They were not even fired upon, and Singapore fell within 2 or 3 days. The British were unable completely, arrogance and inefficiency and bullshit. They wanted the empire just to take out the good things. The rubber from the rubber trees. In those days, tires were made from gum, which came from trees. Today it's not. It's all synthetic nylons and things. But the Americans. I remember Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attacked at 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday the 7th. In Pearl Harbor, it was Sunday the 7th. Probably the next day, my father came into the room where I was sleeping. I was waking up. He had a large map on the wall, and he looked and he said, it'll be all right now. The Americans are in the war. I said, how do you mean? What way? He said, well, they will fight the Japanese, and at the same time they will fight the Germans in Europe. And they did, and they managed very well. During the war, the Americans used New Zealand as a base. First of all, the first ones to come was the 1st American Marine Division. Thousands of them. They had a base in Paikokariki near Wellington. Ships from the American supply fleet would call in Wellington's port and load up on fresh New Zealand meat, which they accepted. They're very fussy. They don't take junk for their soldiers. But of course New Zealand had a very high standard of agriculture and meat production. They took New Zealand meat, refrigerated it in ships. They took veggies and fruit and took it to their fighting soldiers in the Pacific Islands. And they used New Zealand also as a rest and recreation place. And so my generation growing up became very fond of the Americans, and they actually, not only did they win the war, they actually saved our lives. For example, in those days, the cinemas were shut on Sundays. The Americans said, but our soldiers are on leave, we want cinemas. So they said, okay, you can have cinemas. But the children of the city were off school on Sundays, weren't they? And they wanted to go to the picture, so the government said, okay, every soldier can take 2 New Zealand children in with him. They wouldn't accept money, the Americans. On the contrary, they kept pushing bubble gum at us and those chocolate bars, Hershey.
Hershey bars.
I visited the Hershey factory some years ago out of, I said to them, nothing to do with you, and you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I want to say thank you. The American soldiers gave us Hershey bars, and oh, the lady said, I'm somewhat younger than you, but I do know what you're talking about, and you're not the first one who came here to say thank you. Anyway, Americans, they actually won the war, and we were very thankful for them. We visited New Zealand, my wife and I, a few years ago, and fortunately we were happy to see a plaque on the wall that from this spot ships departed with American soldiers to fight the Japanese during World War II. Now, there were Jewish soldiers as well. By the time we were in New Zealand, we were members of the synagogue.
Were you in Wellington?
It's at Wellington, yeah, the capital city. It's where the ship landed. And the American soldiers would come to the synagogue, and the Jewish people would fight over them to invite them to come home for a Shabbat lunch. And every family sort of had their American or their Americans. One said, I've got a friend with me, so my father said, so he can come too. And these chaps enjoyed the meal, and you know, they take the phone number down. My father said, look, if it's a problem, don't even ring, just come. And if you don't go to shul, it doesn't matter, you know where we live, you have the address. They used taxis, they had money, and we had 2 or 3 Americans who were constantly visiting us on Friday evenings and on Shabbat after synagogue. And they were very generous people. They used to come with tins of cigarettes, round tins with 50 cigarettes in them, players I think, for my father. He was very happy. Nylon stockings, nylon. They still had nylon for my mother. And here and there they bought her handkerchiefs and stuff. Where do you get all this stuff? They said at the KP, command post or whatever, PK, whatever they call it, a Shechem, you know, a soldier's store. And my father said, how come you still have nylons? Because they said, because they probably stocked in so many thousands of them, now they're able to give them to us to give away to you people. They were very friendly, the Yanks. A lot of them passed away, died in the fighting. There was a case where an American started going out with our friend's daughter. They became very friendly. When he went off to do his battles, he said, I shall return and we shall marry. I would have taken it in one ear and out the other, because who knows if he'll ever come back. And he never came back to New Zealand. From the islands, his war was over, he was sent to America, back to America. And in those days he sent word, he said, the war's over, I'm okay, I'm coming to New Zealand by ship, expect me and wait for me. It took several months and the fellow arrived. And I remember when I said, you look the same more or less. He said, well, I'm a little bit older. And he came and he married her, and we all went to the wedding. And he said, of course, be warned, I'm not staying in New Zealand. I can't stay in New Zealand, I'm an American. We're going to live in San Francisco. And they got married. They went back to America. He opened up 2 or 3 dry cleaning shops, like it was quite new in those days after World War II, and he did very well. My father asked him, because my parents also visited America on their way to England and Israel, why don't you open more stores? He said, 3 is all I can control. If I take more shops, I'll need managers and it won't be the same. I maintain my own standards. And it was he who explained to my father the new American economy, which was, my father said, you're doing very well, you've got a Cadillac. And he said, it's not mine, it belongs to the hire purchase company. It's what today we call leasing. I pay so much a month, and after 3 years they take it away and bring me a new one. And his house was a huge mansion. Mind you, nothing is small in America, Les. You've been to America. Small there is big here. His house, a palace. My father said, oh, amazing, you really have done well. He said, I haven't. It's mortgaged. I've got another good few years to pay off the mortgage. Fortunately, I'm doing well, I'm managing. He said, nothing in America is bought for the price. It's all on credit. Credit makes money for everyone. It does, it did, until things go bad. In New Zealand we didn't have that. After the war, the best we had was lay-by. If you want something, you go to a shop and say, I want these spectacles. They cost £1,000. Okay, you have to pay £20 a week. After you've come near 1,000, I'll let you have them, and you owe me only 200 once a week, you know. School children of my age, boys, used to say, Michael, come to the pictures. No, I can't, I'm saving up. Saving up. What are you saving up for? I'm saving up to buy a bicycle. I can't come to the pictures. We had no credit, no nothing. It was completely different to New Zealand. Apparently it worked because America became extremely successful after World War II. I want to mention, nothing to do with Sugihara, my appreciation to the American government, A, for sending its soldiers to the Pacific, for saving our lives, what they did for their soldiers. The GI Bill, GI means government issue, soldiers were referred to as GIs. The American government was very grateful to its soldiers, and it declared that every soldier, man or woman, who had served American forces, all the forces, it didn't matter which, overseas, in whatever capacity, was entitled to a free university education. They were asked to what level, BA, MA, doctor, to wherever you can get on us. Thousands of American soldiers came home and went off to university for a free education. But it wasn't just generosity. The Americans were very clever. They knew what they were doing. They knew it was an investment and they would get it all back. After 5 or 6 years, young people started graduating with university degrees. They got good jobs for which they were well paid, and they paid income tax. They started businesses, they started practices, dentists, doctors, all kinds of professions, accountants. They made money, they paid income tax. The government did very well, and America started its best years of prosperity about 10 or 15 years after the war, when these fellows and ladies all came out of the universities. Now, Americans, there were not enough universities, so they said, increase the ones that there are, build more wings, and then build more universities. The same attitude they had when they were building factories for war production. We need another factory, build it. There's no railway to take it to the port. Build a railway line to the nearest junction, you know. Very efficient people, and they, even today, I believe that in 1973, when Syria and Egypt attacked Israel. Of course, I was called up again to serve in the army. We were very, I was personally involved a great deal in the Air Force with these American freighters that brought stuff, American arms and American things for us to fight with as our stocks ran down. I believe that they saved us again. So I myself find that I was saved by Sugihara. I was also saved by the Dutch consul. I was saved by the American army, who saved us in New Zealand during World War II. And then in 1973, as an Israeli, I was also saved indirectly, but nevertheless saved by the Americans in 73. So you see how everything is connected and joined together.
Can I ask you, when you got to Wellington, okay, when you started school, did you go to a public school or a Jewish school?
No, there was no Jewish school. Well, there was Hebrew school for an hour after synagogue on Shabbat, and on Sunday mornings for 2 hours from 10 to 12, we learnt about the Bible and things. Nobody wanted to be there. We all wanted to be elsewhere.
How did you get on with the Australian children? You got on well?
Sorry?
How did you interact with the Australian children, the New Zealand children in Wellington?
I couldn't speak to them when I first came, but it didn't take long to learn to speak English. The kindergarten teacher said, Bertusz, I was called Bertusz in Polish. He has to have an English name. I suggest we call him Bertie, because that was the name that the Queen Elizabeth II, called her husband, King George VI. One of his nicknames was Bertie. And so she started calling me Bertie and told my mother Bertie's and I said, my real name is Berl, B-E-R-L. She said, that won't wash. In New Zealand it has to be Bertie, and Bertie I became. I got on with them well enough. They didn't know anything about the war, except that the Japs had to be shot and killed. Rather narrow-minded.
Did they ever ask you about Poland or being in Japan?
Yes, they asked me about Poland. Not that they cared, but just out of general interest. I went to school, primary school, not the government schools. Then I went to Wellington College, which is a government secondary school, but at a very high level. The education in New Zealand is good.
Did you ever experience any anti-Semitism?
Sorry?
Did you ever experience anti-Semitism?
Very lightly. Look, there was no one can say there was no anti-Semitism, but if you got into a bad argument with somebody, it wouldn't take long until he called you a bloody Jew. So you gave him a fist in the face. Either he went off or he hit you back and you had a fight. That's about as far as it went. But I understood that it was always there, that they're Christians and we are Jewish. And that's how I felt. Now, it was obvious I would leave New Zealand because most of the Jewish youth, after they finished working, after they finished school or university, went off to England, and then they, using England as a base, it transpires that Dr. Schumann and I were in England at the same time, but we never met. But we both laughed when we discussed the advert, go to work on an egg. Later they said you mustn't eat eggs. Anyway, I knew I would come to Israel eventually.
Was your family Zionistic?
Sorry?
Was your family very Zionistic?
Yes. Well, not very Zionistic, but Zionistic. My father came here to have a look around, but he found it wasn't for him. So he went with my mother to live in London, which was very comfortable for him. London and New Zealand are very similar, the way of life. I felt that why I ran away from Sugihara, we're coming back now to Sugihara, because of the Shoah, Holocaust. The question is, and I have often been asked, can it happen again? And I always say most certainly, because A, history always repeats itself. We never learn, but it's there. If you look back and learn history, it repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself, because we don't do things always the right way. Now, for the next Shoah, I didn't want to be around, so I said, I'll come to Israel and join the people here, because here there won't be a Holocaust, so there were only wars, but it's better. Here we are part of an armed force, we are an organized country. I have had 2 sons, they went to school here, they're still here, they each have 3 children. They went to school here. We're 3 generations now of Frankels in Israel. Jewish children playing in their own free country.
And when did you come to Israel? In what year did you come to Israel?
In 1969. I fully believe there will be. Look what's happening all around the world. Jewish people are under attack. So I said, to heck with this. I don't want it anymore. Why be part of a minority subject to the will of the majority? Today it's all right. Tomorrow will come a fellow who will change things. It's best to be here, and I'm very happy here. And I am very thankful, of course, to the Dutch consul and to the Japanese consul, and I'm in touch and very friendly with Sugihara's son, Nobuku. You must know him as well, and his wife, charming lady. At the function in Jerusalem, she came in a dress with high heels, with very thin high heels, and she said, Bertie, save me, I'm going to fall over. So I grabbed her arm and I said, what's the problem? Can I get you some water? No, she said, I'm stuck. So I said, look, the only thing I can lift you out, or get yourself out of the shoes. The ground is quite dry, it's only grass that's been very well watered, it's soft, and then get your shoes. And so she said, why do you people, I want you to tell the mayor. I said, the mayor, I can't get within 100 meters of him. He doesn't know me, he doesn't want to know me. I said, but why do you come here so formally dressed? She said, Nobuku insists on it, that we have to respect the local people by dressing nice. He's always nicely dressed. I asked him, why is he involved? He was born after the war. He had nothing to do with it. And he said, because my father cared so deeply, I am also, now his wife told me, that Nobuku always wants to know about the refugees, and he's very upset that every few years some of them die. But what can you do? It's the natural part of life. They're lovely people. We have a photo here.
Bertie, can I just ask you, before we look at the photo, can I just ask you, Bertie, Beryl Shaw.
Yes.
What happened to his parents?
They stayed in Krakow. They were also my mother's parents. They had Turkish passports as well, because some former relative had once lived in Palestine under the Turkish rule. So the Turks were not all that happy with the Jews. They were, after all, the Turks fought with Germany in World War I. The passports expired, so they took them to the Turkish embassy for renewal. Turks refused to renew it, told the Germans they have no more protection from Turkey, and the Germans took them away to the concentration camp near Krakow, where they were shot upon arrival.
But what I want to ask, why did they not join you? Why did they not join you and your parents when you fled to Lithuania?
Because they were sure that they were safe with these documents. They were sure they were safe. They also thought that they could take care of the rest of the family. And they did, because for a few months my grandmother, Birchall's mother used to go into the ghetto with her Turkish passport, giving people some food which she had hidden in a basket, giving them some clothes, helping them as much as she could. But it didn't last long. The Germans are not stupid, and I felt it was not all that clever to stay there with Turkish papers. But I mean, at that time I was very small. It's now that I thought not very clever to depend on Turkish papers. Had they come with us, they would have been safe.
And when did Bert find out what happened to his parents?
Well after the war.
He was living with you and your parents?
Yes. It took a few years till everybody knew where everyone was. The joint had a system where you used to register, and they would register everybody, and eventually they said this one and this one might be relatives, and then they found out. Now, my mother in London met a woman who had been in the same concentration camp in Krakow. She said, I saw your parents being shot when they arrived. So she already knew that they were killed by the Germans, but there was the verification, you see. Small world, people meet each other.
It must have been very difficult.
Sorry?
It must have been very difficult when Bert found out that his parents weren't alive anymore.
I'm not sure, because we already were hearing about thousands and millions of Jews being killed by the Germans, so he was probably quite a little bit prepared for it. Can't have been easy, but at least being prepared for it. Now, the figure of 6 million Jews, you've been to Auschwitz. I mean, I'm not easily moved, but I went to Auschwitz with Nira and a guide. The whole family used the same guide in Krakow, Janek, and he didn't want to come in. I said, but you'll be my guest. No, I've been. He waited outside in the car, and I came out, and we drove towards, this was the second camp. Auschwitz is quite small, actually. That's why they built Birkenau. Now, I went into Birkenau and walked and walked and walked, and the whole thing is a monstrous city built to house people that you're going to kill. Why not kill them upon arrival? Why keep them and kill them later? Ridiculous. But
they worked then.
They couldn't kill them quickly enough.
But they worked. They worked in the armaments. Many they used for work.
But I was shocked, and I came out and I said, I don't suppose you've got any whiskey in the car. He said, no, but I got an apple from my mother's farm. And so I ate the apple, and I said, listen, let's stop at a bar on our way. I need at least, if not whiskey, then at least a glass of beer. I was depressed. The weather was also very bad. Typical Europe, grey skies, cold wind. It's another thing, but killing 6 million Jews helped Germany lose the war. How many soldiers were involved looking after the Jews who could have been used on the front? You see, this was Hitler again. He made mistake after mistake to our good. Had it been me instead of Hitler, I would have said, leave the Jews. They're running good businesses, they're running government departments, they're running banks. Let's use the Jewish brain to help us in our war effort against England and the other Western countries in Europe. And after we have won, then we will decide what to do with them, if anything. I mean, that's common sense, because a lot of the Jews were more German than they were Jews. But he was an idiot. Well, he wasn't an idiot, but he was not clever, killing the Jews. The Jews would have helped him. Take, for example, the Jewish scientists who made the atom bomb for the United States. Typical. He said to the Jewish people, Ross, and they did. 50,000 left. It included a whole lot of German Jewish scientists who came to England. The English realized what they had, and they also realized that the Germans could very well come and occupy England. So they told the Americans, and the Americans sent a cruiser. There was a war on, and the cruiser took these German Jewish atomic scientists, hardly anyone knew what atomic was, to America. And they started to build the Manhattan Project, to build the 2 atom bombs. Now, these people in conversations, they were interrogated, not interrogated, but questioned. They said they didn't give a damn. They're scientists, not politicians. Whoever gave them the facilities, the money, the budget, and the laboratories to build an atom bomb, they would build an atom bomb, whether it was in Germany or in England or in America. We are scientists first. What great luck that Hitler threw them out. Can you imagine a German atomic bomb? Hitler rings Churchill and he says, surrender or I'll wipe out one of your cities. Churchill would have told him where to go and what to do to himself. So Hitler would say, look at Manchester about midday tomorrow. And at about midday tomorrow, boom, Manchester disappears, like we did after the first bomb on Hiroshima. We didn't go after Nagasaki. Nagasaki was a coincidence because the original target for the bomber called Boxcar was another city. But the captain radioed in, he said, it's covered in cloud, can't see a thing. So they got together, all the bosses of the airbase, and they said, try such and such a city. Not far away, he said, yes, it's clear. They said, go for it. And it was Nagasaki. Now, then the Japanese surrendered because they didn't want... Now, can you imagine Hitler doing that to England? It was very close. But Hitler made the mistake by not just letting them go, but throwing them out. You see, the man was off his nut, for sure. No normal person kills 6 million people just because they're Jewish. I would have used the Jews.
But you know what's amazing is that your parents, your father said to your mother, we're leaving.
Sorry?
Your father had the insight.
Hedda?
Your father had the amazing decision to leave.
Yes, he felt, you see, I spoke to him about that. Most of the people said it's not our business. They always went to the rabbi for advice. The rabbi was the big decision maker for everybody. They were divided into lots of communities in Krakow. They all lived close to each other, each with its own rabbi. And the rabbis didn't know what to do. They said it'll be all right, the Germans will come, we'll live with them, and then they'll go and things will be... My father said it's nonsense, they've no idea. He knew the Germans were coming because they were quite well off, and they had a German maid. And every 2 weeks she got a weekend off. And she came back once, and she towards the end of August, and she said the German army is messing on the border. I think the German army wanted people to see them messing on the border in order to sow fear in Poland. And so my father knew they were coming. Everybody knew they were coming. But my father said good cannot come of it, because he may or may not, he's not sure, but he knew they were not nice people, and they were already killing Jews and messing them about in Germany. They already started in 1933. They started attacking Jews and Jewish shops and Kristallnacht, and slowly word was getting around. Those who wanted to know knew, those who didn't. But my father felt this was not good, and he said we had to get away. Fortunately, he was right. But it's all good luck and good fortune. What did I learn from the Shoah? I learned that it's not good for us to be a minority living with a different majority who can one day change their minds about us and either throw us out or try to kill us. That's one. Two, can it happen again? Most certainly. Look what's going on now with the anti-Semitism in the world. Where are we safe? Here. Only here in Israel are we safe. I remember going off to the 1973 war. Were you here then? Well, in 1973, first of all, I was involved in the 1967 war as a volunteer. And I came during the war. That was my condition to the Jewish Agency in London, only if I come during the war. And I came during the war. And I was surprised at the spirit here, because by then Israel was already winning the Six-Day War. I came on the fourth day. I like to say that my presence helped. The 73 war was different. We were attacked and taken by surprise, and for the first time in history, or for the first time since the War of Independence in 1948, Israeli forces were being pushed back. And I remember my unit, they said, we're moving out. And my commander said, God damn it, and he asked on the radio, he said, okay, we're ready to go. We were in the desert. We could go wherever we wanted. He said, which way are we going? Are we still retreating or are we fighting back? They said, retreat. So we retreated for a little while, and then we got the order, hold at all costs. And we managed. And the next day they said to us, now go as far and as fast as you can toward Egypt. I remember those days, but I was confident. Why was I confident? I was part of a good army where everybody was of the same mind and of the same opinion. The whole country was of the same mind and of the same opinion. I had no doubt that we would win. We would either win the war the next day or in a week's time or in 2 weeks, but win we would. Of course, there would be a cost, a high cost, but there has to be. And I felt safe here. That was the 1973 war. And I thought, that's it. I mean, I've had my wars. But no, in 1982, there's a knock on the door. Come.
It was the Lebanon war.
Yeah, 1982. It was a Saturday evening, I think. I had just been for a run in Ranana. I had a shower. I was looking forward to a small supper. I might watch some television. I knew there was trouble because I could see army cars driving around and trucks and buses, and I said, they're calling up, they're calling up. All of a sudden, a knock on the door, an officer from my unit, Frankel, come. I said, okay, where and when? She said, what do you mean, where? Well, you come with me and you come now. Go quickly, pack a bag, toothbrush, socks, underwear. And she drove me straight to a meeting point where some other chaps from the unit were. Shortly after that, a bus came and took us to the base. In the army, it's all armies, hurry up and wait. And we were there. And we had the 82 war. We went off, I remember we went off to in the north, Lebanon. What a beautiful country. And I had visions of us visiting Lebanon after the war as tourists. Maybe Israeli enterprise would build a hotel or two. There were already plenty of hotels. Beautiful country. It went to pot completely. It was more or less a one-way war, the 82 war. We had things very much our way, but it was a war. And again, I felt completely safe. I was part of a winning army. We only went forward. It was quite odd because we were given a jeep, an armed jeep to protect three fuel tankers that were taking air or petrol for airplanes north to service the helicopters. Should a helicopter need fuel, they would be with us in the front lines. And they told us at all costs you protect the tankers. And we did. Of course there was a hell of a mess because we had a code system. And why would a helicopter need fuel? He was probably at the end of his mission and he got a call to take a wounded soldier to the hospital. Or he took a bullet in the fuel tank and he needed to patch the tank and take fuel. Anyway, the fuel was there, and they told us you will either be used quite a lot or not at all, but you have to be there. All of a sudden the code signs come and cocorico, a helicopter is looking for us. Of course our commander in his nervous tension forgets the code of the day, the colour. You fire a flare to show where you are. He will see the flare and he will land as near to you as he can. So I said, have you written it down? He said, yes, it's in one of my pockets. So he fires the flare and the message comes, idiot, ze shall mol. Of course, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's the next day. But he already knew what was going on and he landed and he said, how much? I said, we've got 3 tankers full. How much do you want? He said, fill her up. And off he went again. So that was our contribution to the war. But what an army. We took the fuel to some school on a hill in Beirut. Christian school, huge school, a university. That was the HQ for the army in Lebanon. A mountain of eggs in the hall, mountain of battle rations, sacks of potatoes, tins of meat, everything. Anyone who wants, take. They said to us, take what you want, as much as you want. It was organized. Then they had ammo as much as we wanted. It was really well organized, the 82 war. And I wasn't afraid because I had the confidence. I was fighting with the Jewish people in the Jewish army and nothing to worry about. You see, if you're a Jew in the American army, you're still the Jew. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the American army, English army as well, South Africa. But I feel very safe here. Now I don't know what's going on with this nonsense about, but I do.
Bertie, can I just ask you, when did you go back to Japan?
Yes.
Because you revisited.
Yes. There's some good stuff here. In November of 2018. Now what happened in November of 2018? We joined a group of people to visit what they called Sugihara's Way. It was a visit to Yaotsu, where he was born, a visit to several cities where he had lived. Here we are here. This was the route.
And you went on a tour, was it mainly Israelis that went? Was it mainly people from Israel?
Yes, it was. You know him, a chappie with a beard, what's his name? Jacob. Mm-hmm. He's also an enthusiast. He used to work in Yaotsu, Jacob, and there were 2 Israeli reporters, one from the electronic press and one from Israel Hayom. Today he's the editor.
And were there any other survivors besides from you? Were there other survivors that were also...
No, I was the only survivor. I went as the survivor. I gave several speeches every day, here and there, treated like royalty. I want to tell you, we have here the program. Here's the program. Not that it's interesting, but everything with a time, everything went tick-tock, stopwatch. You know, I like an army operation, efficiency you've never seen in your life.
And this was reported in Israel Hayom.
Now this is what he wrote, the Israeli writer, when he came back, 2 or 3 pages in the paper. Here's a photo of us. See, my elder son, who was living in Singapore at the time, now he's back in Israel, thought it would be good to come with us for a couple of days, and he would bring his son with him, not far from Singapore, and they met up with us, but at 11 o'clock at night. So we had already been sleeping, and they came and banged on the door. Now, here, him, with the mayor of Nagoya. That's the mayor of Nagoya.
And this is Yossi.
This is Jacob, the Israeli.
Jacob,
chap.
yeah.
You know him.
I know him. I spoke.
What's his name, Jacob?
Yossi.
Who?
Yossi.
Yossi. He knows a great deal about Sugihara.
And this is the memorial.
With the mayor of Nagoya, who asked me how old I am. I said I was 70, and he said, you look much younger. You know, a real politician, but I expect good for his job. Now, at Nagoya here, they had a new statue and a park in the memory of Sugihara. And here I am with the Chepi in charge, pointing to our name on the Sugihara list.
And this is
This is a Japanese man in
and
charge.
has the list with your name on.
This is my name I'm pointing to. Can I turn? These. The next morning I went out of my room.
And they had it in the Japanese
Yeah.
newspapers.
There should be another photo here. We'll come to it. I went out of my room, and a Japanese man is walking in the corridor, and he looks at me, smiles, and he says, hello. And I'm waiting for the lift, and a Japanese couple come out and look at me and smile. I said, Christ almighty, these people seem to think they know me. Yeah. I went to the newspaper stand, and I saw a Japanese newspaper. I started flipping through it. Oh, here's my photo in the paper. Now here you see a statue of Sugihara in the same park, and I have a visa on cardboard which I took with me, and they said Ki'ilu, as if he's giving it to you, and symbolic. I don't understand what it says because it's in Japanese, but it's all good.
And it's here you speaking.
Here I am giving a lecture, addressing the citizens of Kanazawa.
And you also spoke to school students. This is special. This is so special.
Now here we are, Sugihara Museum Yotsu. This is my translator. She was Samudalai. Without her, I wouldn't have managed to speak. He doesn't speak
no English. And I think he came to Israel.
He came many times.
He was here in Netanya.
We met, he was there.
Netanya.
We're old friends. I said, how do you stay mayor? And he said to the translator, by winning elections, which was my question. He's very popular back home. Now, this is the editor today of Israel Today. Nice chap, very tall chap, very nice chap. We had lunch with him here, lunch with the mayor of Yotsu. So you see the food, little plates, and he said to me, do what I do, eat in the same order. Here we are at lunch, Hagai, my son, and my grandson, and here addressing the Yotsu school students. If you look carefully, you'll see that they have an electric appliance here saying, welcome Mr. Bertie Frankel. You know, they're very good with electronics.
You're giving an address at the Yatsu students. And did they translated? You spoke.
They sat quietly when question time came. They asked questions. Politeness. The Japanese people are very cultured. They probably look upon us as fools, but it's a pleasure to be in Japan. Now here we are, shaking hands with the children. They don't shake hands, they don't touch you. They bow and they say hello, but they don't shake hands. But in this case, somehow somebody shook my hand, and Yossi said, go in there like a politician and shake their hands. They loved it. They all queued up, and the girls as well, to shake hands. And the teachers were all laughing. And here we are. Here I gave them a talk about the future generations. Sugihara didn't save just the 2,000, he gave 2,000 odd visas, which saved about 6,000 people. He didn't save just them. He saved the future generations, because I grew up and had children, and my two children grew up and they had children, and if you can pick up that photo at the far end of the white, bring the photo, it is. The photograph, yeah, you see, there's a photo of 3 generations of Frankels. Now, what's more, you see, we took this photo at 3 generations of Frankel Sugihara survivors, Sugihara Street, Netanya, July 2016. We were on holiday. Now that's what Sugihara saved, not just me.
It's the
and my
future
picture saved
generations.
this generation as well.
And there'll be future, even more.
The future. And it will go on and on and on.
And this is in Sugihara Street in Netanya.
This is what Menachem Begin said. He said the Germans didn't kill just 6 million Jews. Those 6 million would have had children, and their children would have had children. He killed multiple millions. Yeah. And so here I'm lecturing to the Yaotsu school, using him as an example, my grandson, and saying this is what Sugihara saved. And he'll have children who in turn. Sugihara's statement on the wall of the school. This is written on the wall of the school, in Hebrew and in English. It's there permanently. This is why he did it. He said nuts to Tokyo, and he did it.
No. This is in the Yatsu Museum.
At the Yaotsu Museum is Sugihara's desk. They asked me if I wanted to take us out.
And Bertie, have you ever been to Lithuania?
Where?
Have you ever gone back to Lithuania, to Kovno?
To where?
To Lithuania. To Kovno.
No, I should go, but I really don't want to go back. I know I won't like it. I don't like going back. I can live without it. Nero wants me to go, but I don't want to go back. It's very similar. This is the desk that Sugihara sat on. My grandson had no hesitation in sitting there stamping pieces of paper. This is, in Yaotsu there's another park, a Sugihara Memorial Park. Beautiful, beautiful. Everything is surrounded by water. Water in Japan means tranquility and peace. You won't see a drop of dust. You won't see no cigarette butt. You won't see, I don't think they dare smoke in public. You won't see any rubbish. Tidy and clean. And in the same place they have three bells. Here we are ringing the bells. Now what are these bells? This is on a hill. When a survivor comes back, they take him to the park and he rings the bell. The bell is heard in the city, and the citizens of the city say, a survivor has visited the city. You see. Here's the city behind us on the, it's on a hill. Then we went to a town called Takayama, where he had also worked. And here we are with the mayor of Takayama. The mayor's not in the picture, he's here. That's my translator. I called her she was for me. Now, one day in the city I gave a speech to the elderly people. They asked me, it was open to the public. There's a survivor here, he'll talk. About 60 or so people, middle-aged and older. I think some of them spoke English. Anyway, I started. I spoke 3 or 4 sentences and got into my stride, and all of a sudden she says, "Hey, what about me?" Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to stop to give her a chance to translate. Anyway, she was very efficient, and after 2 or 3 experiences, we got used to each other, and I knew how much to speak before letting her translate, before she would forget. It went rather well. Without her, we would have been lost, because you have a problem. The Western tourist has a problem in Japan. At Takayama market in the morning, they wanted us to ride in a rickshaw, you see. And this is my son Aidan. He took my scarf because he was freezing cold, and it was cold. Oh, it was cold. Here, I say so, it was very cold. And here we are in the city. We arrived at Suruga, the port where we had originally landed when we came from Russia. Now,
and you presented a Hanukkah.
Yeah, we brought him. In Japan you give gifts, and so we took with us a lot of gifts. We all shared the cost. He probably has a dozen Hanukkah already. We gave him a Hanukkah. This is later, he is a very nice chap, speaks a little bit of English, and before that, he gave me a basket. We came, and Yossi says to me through the bus window, the fellow holding the basket, well, it all started at lunch actually. This is part of the road here.
Where they gave the apples.
This is the spot where we all landed, where the gangway ended when we arrived.
This is where you had your first red apple.
Yeah, they made a memorial of it. They put more concrete down and they kept the spot. Now, today it's a bustling little port, not important, mainly freight which goes on towards Vladivostok. But at lunchtime they took us to some museum there in the city, and we had lunch, and I mentioned I would like an apple, because the last time I was here I had a lovely red apple. The chappie in charge of public relations for the city, you know him, Missouri, comes here quite often. What's his name? Names elude me now these days. What's his name? Anyway, he says, what do you want? And I said, Nero said, Bertie wants an apple. Stop somewhere and let him go in and buy a red apple. He smiled and he said, it's all arranged already. Fine. Now, when the Japanese say it's all arranged already, it's not in Israel where you say, smochelai yebeseda. It jolly well is already arranged. And we came to the wharf. After I saw this, I didn't see it. I was standing next to it, and the chappie in charge of the public said, look down, Bertie. And I looked down and said, ha! He said, we did it for people like you to come back and see where you were.
That's wonderful.
We then drove in our little bus. We had a private little bus to the museum at the port. And Yossi said the chappie with the basket is the mayor. So I knew who would approach me first. I was always the first one off the bus. I waited for the others, but they all said, no, go, you have to go first. And then I helped Nira off the bus. And then there's the mayor and he's holding up a basket full of red apples, and he says, would you like some apples? Oh, you know, that night we cut up the apples and ate them. More. Here I am addressing school students. Now at Saruga, the students leapt it up. Some of them had never met, or most of them had never met a survivor. Now, at that time, Saruga also had an application to UNESCO to become a special city. I knew it wouldn't pass because UNESCO is rather anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and they were saying we were so nice to the Jews, we looked after them. What would UNESCO care? At the school, announcement came and he said somebody else got it, Saruga didn't get it. What do I think of that? Oh, they're involving me in Japanese politics. Children. I said, my opinion is that it's a pity, but I said you can be quite confident that the government of Japan will know what to do and how to handle the situation. I got out of it. In Saruga, they staged for us on a large launch from the harbour board to take us out to sea to the entrance of the harbour where we were, and then to sail in just like we did on the Amakusa Maru in 39, sorry. It was a lovely cruise, a lovely boat. I said, new? They said, no, it's about 12 years old. But it was spotless, it was shining, it was perfectly maintained. The Japanese know how to look after things. Of course, they insisted that we wear life jackets. Everyone wore a life jacket. As you see, the wind is ruffling my hair. The wind was quite strong. Here's the mayor giving me a basket of apples.
And this is in Saruga.
Yeah. Now, here the mayor and I are posing for the press. There was a large group of press people. Obviously they had publicized it to the press, and the press interviewed me and asked me questions. Now, they didn't all scream and shout at me at once. Oh, they're Japanese. They had arranged who would be first. The first one stands up, says, hello, my name is so-and-so, I'm from such and such radio station. May I speak with you? Certainly. He does his, says, thank you, goes aside, comes a girl. Hello, Mr. Frankel, I'm so-and-so from such and such a group. May I interview you? I said, by all means. She asked me questions. They ask you a question and wait for the answer. They don't ask the second question while you're in the middle. Very nice and quiet. Then they're all finished. They all say thank you very much and sit down. You know, it's the way to handle. I tell you, the Japanese really impressed me. They handle things in a very nice way. And here I am on television. That's on television. Not that I understood a word. I understood what I said. No, what I said wasn't there. They had gone over my voice with Japanese, because who would understand English? Now I think this is how much I paid for Nira. That's another thing. That's about it of the visit.
But that visit, it had a very profound impact on you.
Sorry?
It had a special. You were very glad that you went.
I was very glad I went. Look, first of all, I went in what I call real time as a grown-up, and I'm able to understand and remember and see. When I had been there previously, I was a child and I looked upon things from the side. I wasn't involved, it was my parents who were involved, and they in turn involved me. Here I was not only involved, I was the whole thing. I was the survivor. And I said once in the presence of the two journalists, we were having a meal for breakfast in a hotel, I said, I don't see all the fuss, I've done nothing. All I did was survive and stay alive, and for this I'm a sort of a, not a hero, but they liked it. It was modest. They said, that's when we started to like you, because you're a modest. I said, had you asked me earlier if I'm modest or not, I would have said yes. You would have liked me yesterday as well. But he said, you have to understand them. They, the Japanese, the mayor of, the last mayor, Tsuruga, he said, listen, the philosophy, derech ha metargemet, everything takes time. He said, the reason that you're popular and that people come and they want to see you is that they feel good about it, because you are the product that they made when they received your parents. Pity your parents are not here with you and all that, but not everyone can come. Here they see before their own eyes, and the children see it as well, the result of their kindness when they let the Jewish people into Japan and into Tsuruga and into Kobe. They're happy to see you, and you've brought joy to them. I said, well, I'm getting a lot of pleasure out of it myself. And I learnt about Japan, a fascinating country. They don't give a hoot about what's happening. America, Russia, they have their own way. It will be all right. Like I mentioned, they only learn English if they have to. Obviously, they will only learn Russian if they have to, or French. But they learn well. Very efficient. And then we chatted, and I told them I'm quite Japanese. I have had 2 Japanese cars, Subaru and the bigger one, what do you call it? I said most of the cars in Israel are now Japanese or Korean. I have a Japanese pen. My watch is a Seiko. Because they asked me what is my attitude toward Japan. So I said, if I buy something like a refrigerator, they stopped coming from Japan. But still, I said, if I have to buy European or Japanese, I'll try and buy the Japanese product if the price is in comparison and if the product is better, and it usually is. I say, when it comes to a car, there's no problem. Japanese cars are much better than French cars or English cars. They loved it. One of them, I said, do you look at Japanese films on television? So I said, well, I don't think we have any in Israel, but even if we did, I wouldn't understand it. I don't speak Japanese. She said, why not? I said, for the same reason that most Japanese people don't learn English. I don't have to learn Japanese, and it's a hard language for us to learn, so I didn't learn it. I said, I had enough problems learning Hebrew. But they are a lovely people. Strict and firm. If you break the rules, you pay. Jail, court, no monkeying around. The penalty is 10 years, 10 years. 1,000 shekel, 1,000 shekel. Boom. Justice is swift, but it's justice. I said, who chooses the justices? And they said, oh, it's a long process, you know, like here, some here. But he said, it's all fair and democratic. They insist on being democratic. MacArthur, after World War II, became governor of Japan. He created a constitution for Japan, no army. They don't want an army. No nuclear weapons, last thing they want. Now they're finding a way of changing the constitution to get an army because America is pushing them. They must learn how to defend themselves, and the rest of the Asian democracies, because you know what's happening with China. Fine people, very nice people. At the airport, on the way out, leaving, there's a desk, leave us your small change, which was always a problem. Everything seemed to cost 20 shekel. 20 shekel is 1,000 of their money, yen. So the easiest thing is to give a 20 yen note. At the end of the day, you've got a ton of change in your pocket, and my translator took over. She said, no, take your money out and I'll pay with the small money. Chuk, 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 chuk. There's one. Chuk, 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 chuk. Otherwise, she said, at the end of the day, your trousers will fall down. At the airport, when you leave, they know about this problem. Took out all the Japanese. She said, how do you want it? I said, oh, dollars, probably. She said, where are you going? What's your last destination? I said, Israel. Do you want it in Israeli money? Oh, in Japan. And she gave me a few notes of shekels. Much efficient. They announce on the airlines are very good. We flew Singapore, not Singapore. We flew the Australian airline that flies to Hong Kong. That came here. What's it called?
Is it Cathay
Pacific. The plane was 15 minutes late. I already saw it standing outside. A new plane, an A350-10. The difference between the 10 and the 9, we came on a 9, is that the 10 is longer, bigger, and instead of 2 sets of wheels, it has 3 sets of wheels. Inside, it has more seats, and of course, you are more cramped. But nevertheless, I saw it standing there, and my phone rings, and unfortunately, there's a delay. The plane will be delayed by 15 minutes. Why bother? Because the Japanese insist on informing the passengers. Wow. It's unbelievable the lengths they go to. This chappie from the newspaper bought a bottle of Japanese whiskey, which is very good. They offered us Japanese whiskey in the evening, and it's very nice. I'm not much of a drinker. I usually had a beer with my dinner. But one day I had a Japanese whiskey. They said, we don't have Scotch, we only have Japanese. Fine. Can I see the bottle? It didn't help because it's all written in Japanese. But everybody says, including Dr. Schumann, you know, he was in Japan. He said also, Japanese whiskey is good. It is good, nice whiskey. Anyway, why am I mentioning whiskey?
No, it's just how the Japanese are so efficient and they're so welcoming.
Yeah. They seem to do things the right way. They've got their act together, and everyone is not a boss. There's one boss and he gives the rules and everything works calmly and cleanly. Look at the rugby. In the last World Cup, Japan got as far as the semi-final or quarter-final.
They won, and then they won.
Sorry?
They won the World Cup in the rugby.
They did very well. Of course, they were trained by Australians or South Africans, but that doesn't matter. Most of the players were Japanese. They do everything well. Look at their cars.
It's true. Bertie, I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much.
Not at all, Liz.
You know, Bertie, if we look at this picture, this is how you start your presentation. This is the map.
Yeah.
From Krakow to Lithuania, and then
the red line,
all the way down from Lithuania. You went to Moscow, the Trans-Siberian Railway, to Riga, Japan, Kobe, and then you came to Australia, and you've come all the way back to Israel. And that's your life story, Bertie, is amazing. And I am so privileged to It really is, and I'm so privileged to know you. We've known each other for quite a few years. When we first met the mayor from Yurtsu who spoke in Netanya. And I remember I met you at that event, and you told me about your father in Sugihare's in Kovno when he got the visas. And I've always remembered that encounter, and it's been
I'm
such a pleasure.
Very lucky, and I'm very lucky to be alive. I could have easily been killed here a dozen times over.
And you could have been killed in Krakow if your father wouldn't have had the foresight, if he wouldn't have understood what was going to be happening, and he wouldn't have left.
Look, when I lived in London a few years, I volunteered to help the Jewish National Fund, the Keren Kayemet. They have committees which we used to buy a West End cinema for a night and sell the tickets at a large increase to the Jewish community, make money for the JNF. I was on the one of the committees, and one of the fellows that was on it was the chairman of a very large gambling organisation in London, Ledbrooks, the chairman of Ledbrooks. He's dead now. His name was Cyril Steen. He became the boss because he married the boss's daughter. But he learned the business very well, and he multiplied the branches and really put the organisation on the map. Became a very big donor to Israel. Now, Cyril Steen, one day he rings me up and he says, "Bertie, yes, we have a meeting today in my office at 5 o'clock. I said, "Yes." He said, "Can you come at 4 o'clock? I said, "Yes." "Is there a special reason?" He said, "Yes, I want to talk to you." "Okay." So I came at 4 o'clock, and his secretary, of course, was brief. "You can't get in there." "Chuk, chuk, 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 Mr. Frankel." "Ah, sit down." He says to her, "Nothing until 5 o'clock. Nothing, not even if the Queen herself comes." "Right. Bertie, I heard that you are a refugee from Poland during World War I, and I didn't know."
World War II, yeah.
"Tell me your story." "Jesus, Cyril, I mean, I'm not prepared. I have to... What do you remember? Tell me." So I told him. You know, one thing leads to another, and we chat, and he says to me, "You know, I'm a betting man, and I'm running this organisation. We do horses, we do dogs, we do everything." But he was already at the respectable level of management. He wasn't on a fortune they make. He says, "I know betting, and I know odds, and I know the chances. And if I was to talk to you in Poland, I'd say you have no chance. But obviously, we're sitting here now in London, so you obviously managed, you did it." I said, "Well, what do you think our chances had been?" He said, "Several million to 1. And you took it, you won." He said, "Had I made book on you, I'd have made a fortune." He said, "That's how I see your presence here." I said, "I think you're right. We were very lucky. The German bombing right at the start, and then the German, you know, a million things. The ship could have got sunk in Japan. Who knows what would have happened. Then the Japanese came south in World War II, and MacArthur came to save us.
It's so many things.
Incredible.
Even to get those visas with Sugihara, the miracle of those visas, the visas from Zwartendijk and from Sugihara, it's incredible.
My life is incredible.
It really is.
I'm very lucky to be alive.
Bertie, I want to ask you, what message do you give? What message do you impart to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations?
Well, I think I mentioned, you see, I ended up with boxes and envelopes full of paper and certificates from the different countries, and I hate paper in envelopes and boxes, and I hate a mess. I like things to be... So I made the album of our trip from Poland to New Zealand, and then I put all the photos into this one where we revisited Japan. And I did it so that my children and my grandchildren can refer to it at any time they want. Now my message is stay united, stay in Israel, be here, because we are not safe in any other country. I did not need 2 years on the road as a refugee. Look, you know nothing as a refugee. We came to New Zealand in 1941 in October. We had not heard of the Battle of Britain. We didn't know about the battles in El Alamein, not the first one nor the second one. We had no knowledge of the 8th Army's activities in the Western Desert. We had no knowledge of the fall of Singapore and Malaya and all the Asian countries. We started to be involved in Pearl Harbor, which we were told about, but there was a censorship. And so we were only told, but like everyone else, what the government wanted us to know. And they only knew what the Americans wanted to, but it was enough. We heard about Pearl Harbor, we said enough. The whole country went to help the Americans, because we had to stand, well, actually they came to help us, but we knew that the Americans would save us. After the war, Kol Hakavod, the Americans refused to give Singapore back to the British. They refused to give Malaya back. They said, no, we're not interested in colonialism. Truman made sure that the countries went back to the native people. And Singapore was a right real mess. Look what they've done with it now.
It's a drill today.
I was there. My son lived there for years. Amazing. They plan ahead. There's a whole building called Future Planning, which I visited. It's a museum. This is what will be next year. This is the next 5 years. Now there's no more room in Singapore. Where are they going? Down. They're digging in, it's hard rock. And they dig another few floors underneath existing streets and amazing, incredible. We were having a cup of tea at Changi Airport. They had 4 terminals. 4 terminals! Now they've got 5, you see. But when we were there, we were talking about this, and the chappie said to me, this one spoke him I met him by coincidence waiting to pay for coffee. He said, where do you think you're sitting now? You're sitting 3 levels beneath the surface. Wow. Because we didn't have enough room, so we went down. We're already doing it. You know, we think we are very clever. The white people, well, we had no idea. The Asians, the Singapore Chinese, mainly the Chinese, they are the majority in Singapore, and the Japanese, they are extremely intelligent people and capable. They work very fast, they build, they create, it's amazing.
But you know it's amazing that the Japanese, that they welcomed you so well, and they saved your life as well.
They saved my life.
They really did, you and your parents.
Yeah.
And what I'm also amazed at is that your parents took in Bert Shaw, and treated him like their own son.
Well, they saved him, yeah.
And they saved him.
This is what I don't want to happen again. And so I say that here we have 3 kindergartens opposite my apartment. They might scream and shout outside, but I don't hear it. I see it as music, because the sound of children screaming and shouting is a natural sound, and I like it. And I look and I say, Jewish children playing in the Jewish country, Lihiyot Am Chofshi Be'artzeinu.
To be a free nation in our own land.
This is the way to go. Now, we were very pleased and proud. I mean, I came here and I was a soldier. I spent 20-odd years in the Miguim. I had 3 wars as a volunteer in 67, then I was in the 73 war and in the 1982 war. And I feel at home here. I feel very safe. But I don't want to go through it again. Yeah. So I'm staying here. I live here. And if we all, I don't care really about the Jews overseas. If they want, they can come here and join us. But we don't have to protect them. I was really angry when we sent aeroplanes to not Ukraine, the country that's fighting Russia now.
It is Ukraine.
Ukraine. They didn't want to come. They had Israeli passports, but they came here, stayed a week, got the passport and went back to Ukraine.
There are quite a few that have
using the passport to move around, but they had no intention of coming here.
But there are quite a few, there are many that have stayed.
So I don't care about them. I say, you want to come to Israel and be Israeli, be Israeli. I personally stay here. Now, I did the army and I did the wars. I was the first generation of Frankels to serve in the Israeli army. After me, my sons grew up. They both went into the army. One went into the Navy, became a senior sergeant. He was so good at his work that they put him into the Navy aeroplane which flew over the water to plot which ships were near our coast. I want to tell you that among their military duties they also found a lot of drugs floating around which had been left for smugglers. But the Navy took it and took it ashore and gave it to the police. You see,
amazing.
Now that's one. So one son was in the Navy, the other one was in the Army in intelligence. He rose to the rank of major, and then he decided to leave. He didn't want to stay, and he went into high tech. With a lot of the knowledge that he learned, he was in Shmona Matayim.
Gee, this is the highest.
Yeah, so he, and then he was sent by his company to Singapore. He enjoyed Singapore, the organization and everything, a lot of business. They wanted to bring him home. He said no, he doesn't want to come. He left and formed his own company. And now he has left the company running in Singapore and he operates it from here. Wonderful. With an assistant there.
So Bertie, you know, you have become such a success.
Sorry?
Not only are you a survivor, but you are a success. You are an icon, you're a hero, you really are. And I just want to wish you all the mazel and bracha till 120 in good health, that you should just have all the nachas from your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and you are such an inspiration for all of us. And from the moment I saw you, the very first time I saw you many years ago, we just had a very special connection. And when you told me the story in Netanya with the mayor of Yatsu, I was so taken aback. I could not believe what I was hearing. And now to hear and to see the pictures and to see the original passports.
So that's why,
it's amazing, Bertie.
That's why I put this together. Also for my mother and father, all the papers and documents, I made the same thing. My children and grandchildren and anyone else who want to look at it and to refer to it can read. Now, I wrote a book about my life, of course, and I gave a copy each to the grandchildren. It was written in English, and to my sons. Again, I put everything in writing. Keep it, read it, it's there. It's only now that my elder granddaughter was 18 and she's now in the army. And we're very proud of that. She's the third generation of Frankels in the army. She has a little bit of downtime, so she read my book in the army. And of course her commander, they all speak English in her unit, her commander looked at it and he said, in 2 days I want the book. And she said, I might not finish. He said, so you'll finish it after I finish it. So he read the book. After she finished it, he read the book. And he said, I want to meet your father. So she said, anytime you want to come, he'll be happy to receive you. Why not? He said, it's a charmed life. I really agree.
It's
I'm really
miraculous.
lucky. It's not me.
It's Mina Shemayim. It was meant to be. And it's miraculous. Your life is full of miracles beyond belief.
And I'm happy for every day that I'm alive. I like life. And a lot of my friends are dying. A lot of the chaps in the army, 1 or 2 went off during the war. But now they're all getting old. I myself am getting old.
You're amazing.
I forget things.
Bertie, you're amazing. And I just Bertie, I am so grateful to you.
Listen, we'll have to meet again.
But I'm very grateful to you, Bertie.
Pleasureless.
And you should
I'm
just
glad
have...
to get the message out. I told
That's
Dr.
wonderful.
Schumann I'll do anything to help the message of Sugihara. You'll have to come during normal times.
Well, Bertie,
we didn't even have a cup of tea.
Bertie, I want to wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
To you and your dear family, and you should just have mazel and bracha.
Thank you, Les. It's been a pleasure. But like I say,